It's 11:42 at night, and he's lying next to her, both of them staring at the ceiling instead of each other. The TV is off. The room is dark except for the blue glow of his phone screen, still lit from a text he sent 4 minutes ago that hasn't been answered yet. He can hear her breathing change, the way it does when she's awake but pretending not to be. His thumb hovers over the screen. He wants to ask, "Are we okay?" But he already knows that asking is going to make it worse, so instead he just lies there, running the last conversation through his head for the 9th time, trying to find the sentence where it went wrong. Why does she seem further away lately? Did I do something? Is this just what happens after a while? Am I trying too hard or not hard enough? Do I even know the difference anymore? Did I lose her, or did I lose myself somewhere along the way, and she's just the first person to notice? The refrigerator hums somewhere in the apartment. Neither of them moves to fix it. Down the hall, a car passes on the street outside, and its headlights sweep briefly across the ceiling, lighting up the small gap of mattress between them for a second before the room goes dark again. He notices that gap. He didn't used to notice it. Wait, read that last thought again, because that's the one that matters. Most guys think attraction fades because the spark runs out, like it's a battery draining on its own schedule. But the truth is colder and more useful than that. Attraction doesn't fade on its own. It gets pushed out slowly by habits so small and so socially acceptable that almost nobody ever names them out loud. You're not unlovable. You're not too much or too little. You are not broken. And this is not proof that you don't know how to be a good partner. Every man who has ever loved someone has stood exactly where you're standing right now, wondering what he can't see about himself. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which of these 7 habits you're running, in real time, in your own relationship, and more importantly, you're going to understand why they felt like love while you were doing them. Let's get into it. Most guys believe attraction is built the same way it starts, with effort, romance, big gestures, saying the right thing at the right moment. But the real truth is that attraction isn't built by what you do for someone. It's built by what you don't need from them. Her nervous system is reading you constantly, underneath the words, faster than either of you can think, and it is asking one question on a loop. Is this a person I can lean on, or a person I now have to manage? Here's the part almost nobody explains. When a man becomes unattractive to the woman he loves, it is almost never because he stopped being kind, or stopped being attentive, or stopped trying. It's because somewhere along the way, without meaning to, he handed her the wheel of his own emotional state and asked her to drive it for him. And a woman can love a man deeply and still feel her body pull away from that weight, the same way you'd instinctively step back from someone standing too close to the edge of something. This isn't a character flaw, and it isn't a sign that you don't love her enough. Most of these habits were learned honestly, in childhoods where love had to be earned through vigilance, or in past relationships where disappearing felt safer than staying and getting hurt again. Your body built these patterns to protect you once, a long time before she ever walked into the picture, and it kept running them long after they stopped being necessary. The way a smoke detector keeps going off in a kitchen that isn't actually on fire anymore. This isn't about being colder or more distant. It's about becoming a man whose peace doesn't depend on her reaction to him, because that peace is the single most attractive thing you can bring into a room. Attraction was never really about height, or money, or how sharp you look walking into a restaurant. Underneath all of that, a woman's body is asking a much older, much simpler question. Is this a man I can actually rest next to? Once you see this pattern, you'll start noticing it everywhere in your relationship. Here's exactly where it shows up first. Here's the part no one talks about, and it's the quietest one on this list. It's the habit of needing constant reassurance dressed up as communication. Most guys who do this think they're just being honest about their feelings, checking in, making sure things are good between them. But here's what nobody explains. There's a difference between checking in and checking whether you're still loved, and her body can tell the difference even when her mind is still being polite about it. Picture the disconnecting version. He's at his desk, phone face up next to his keyboard, and he texts her 3 times in an hour after a slightly short reply. You good? Did I do something? You seem distant. Talk to me. He checks the little delivered status under each one like it's a heart monitor. Each message technically reasonable on its own. They land like a hand gripping her wrist a little tighter every time she tries to pull it back to breathe. And by the 3rd message, she's not even annoyed exactly. She's just tired. The specific kind of tired that comes from feeling responsible for someone else's calm. Now picture the connecting version. Same short reply from her, same uneasy feeling in his chest. But instead of reaching for his phone, he closes it, takes one breath, and lets the discomfort sit in his body without handing it to her to fix. He texts once, hours later, calm and specific. Hey, I noticed things felt a little off earlier, no pressure. Just wanted you to know I'm here when you want to talk. Something in her registers, quietly, without even meaning to, he can handle not knowing right away. That single sentence does more for attraction than the 3 panicked ones combined, because it proves his stability doesn't live inside her phone. Not louder texts, not more check-ins, not asking, "Are we okay?" for the 4th time this week, but a man who can sit in uncertainty without needing someone else to resolve it for him immediately. That's when your presence stops feeling like a question she has to keep answering and starts feeling like a place she gets to come back to. Think about that for a second, because it explains something most guys get backwards. Reassurance seeking feels like love from the inside, urgent, caring, focused entirely on her. But her nervous system doesn't experience it as focus. It experiences it as a hand reaching for a rope, and somewhere in her body she registers that she's the rope. Emotional distance in a relationship isn't like a wall going up overnight. It's like scar tissue, forming slowly, over 100 small moments where reassurance got asked for instead of simply felt. Each individual text is harmless. The pattern, over months, is what quietly teaches her that calm is her job now, not his. And here's the identity shift underneath this one. The part that actually changes the habit instead of just managing it. This isn't a technique for texting less. It's what it looks like when a man has learned to sit with not knowing for a little while without treating that discomfort as an emergency someone else has to resolve. Most guys try to fix the anxious texting by simply forcing themselves not to send it, gritting their teeth through the urge. That works for about a week. What actually works is dealing with the discomfort underneath the urge, because the moment you can tolerate uncertainty without needing her to immediately smooth it over, the urge to check in 9 times just quietly stops having a job to do. And once that changes, something else starts changing too. Something in how you handle it when she actually calls you out on something. This is where it gets really interesting, because this next one hides inside something that looks like maturity. It's the habit of over-explaining, of turning every small moment of friction into a courtroom defense. Most guys think this is just being transparent, laying everything out so there's no room for misunderstanding. But here's what changes everything once you see it. Over-explaining isn't communication. It's a nervous system trying to control an outcome it's scared of, dressed up in reasonable-sounding words. Picture this. They're in the car on the way home, streetlights sliding across the windshield, and she says, offhand, not even accusingly, "You seem kinda checked out at dinner with my parents." The disconnecting version, his hands tighten slightly on the wheel and he launches into a 4-minute breakdown, work stress, bad sleep, a comment her dad made 3 weeks ago, building his case sentence by sentence, timeline and all, while she slowly turns her head toward the window and starts nodding just to end it. The connecting version, he's quiet for a second, actually feels the sting of being seen and says simply, eyes still on the road but voice softer, "Yeah, you're right, I was in my head, that's on me, not you. Nothing else. No case. No defense." Her exhale in that moment is almost audible, and her hand finds his on the gear shift without either of them mentioning it, because something in her just thought, he can hear something hard about himself without making me feel guilty for saying it. Not a longer explanation. Not more context. Not a better argument for why it wasn't really his fault, but a man secure enough to simply absorb a truth without needing to soften it first. And when you can do that, a woman stops bracing herself before she tells you something real, and starts trusting you with the things she used to keep to herself. Here's what changes everything once you actually notice it happening in real time. Over-explaining isn't really about her at all, even though it looks aimed at her. It's a man trying to manage his own discomfort at being seen as anything less than perfect, and using words as the tool to do it. This isn't a communication skill you're missing, it's an identity shift. The same shift that separates someone who needs to be right from someone who's simply comfortable being human in front of another person. A 4-minute defense doesn't actually make the moment less true, it just makes it longer. And somewhere around minute 2, she's no longer hearing the explanation. She's just watching him work very hard to avoid a feeling that, honestly, wouldn't have lasted more than 10 seconds if he'd just let it land. But absorbing the truth in a small moment is one thing. What happens when the moment isn't small at all is where most men lose everything without ever raising their voice. Here's the one most couples never figure out until it's already cost them something. It's disappearing during conflict, not physically, but everywhere that matters. Most guys think going quiet during an argument is the mature move, the alternative to yelling, proof they're not one of those guys. But the deeper truth is that silence without presence doesn't feel like peace to the person across from you. It feels like abandonment wearing a calm face. Picture the disconnecting version. Voices rise slightly in the kitchen, and he goes flat, arms crossed, eyes fixed somewhere over her shoulder at a point on the wall that doesn't exist, answering in one-word sentences until it blows over. He drifts toward the living room, then the bedroom, then just stops answering at all, and the apartment gets that specific kind of quiet where you can hear the refrigerator again. Her brain is quietly registering, he's not here anymore, and I'm the only one still trying. Now the connecting version. Same rising voices, same tightness in his jaw, same urge in his chest to shut the door and wait it out. But instead he says, out loud, hand briefly on her arm before he steps back, I need 30 seconds. I'm not leaving. I just need to not say something I'll regret. Then he actually comes back in 30 seconds, not 40 minutes, sits closer than before, not further away, knee touching hers on the couch. Something in her softens instantly, not because the conflict resolved, but because for the first time in a long time, distance had a return date attached to it, not the silent treatment. Not walking to another room without a word, not waiting for her to calm down before you're willing to re-engage. But a man who can name his own overwhelm out loud and still choose to stay in the room, emotionally, even when every instinct says to disappear. That's when conflict stops feeling like the end of connection, and starts feeling like the place connection actually gets built. Your nervous system in conflict works a lot like a smoke detector mounted in a hallway. It cannot tell the difference between your partner raising her voice about dishes and actual danger, so it sounds the same alarm either way, and going quiet is often just that alarm doing what alarms do, pulling you away from the perceived threat. That reaction isn't weakness, and it isn't something to be ashamed of. But an alarm going off doesn't mean you have to leave the building. This isn't a trick for staying calm during arguments. It's what it looks like when someone has learned that the discomfort of conflict is survivable, so there's no longer a reason to evacuate every time it starts. And once a woman knows you'll stay through the hard parts, the next habit is the one that quietly convinces her whether staying was worth it. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because this next one is disguised as effort. It's performing instead of being present, trying so hard to impress her that you forget to actually be with her. Most guys think grand gestures and constant charm are what keep a woman interested. But the real truth is that a woman doesn't fall for the highlight reel. She falls for the version of you that exists when the highlight reel stops running. Picture him at dinner, candlelight, phone angled slightly on the table for the photo later, already narrating the night in his head as a story he'll tell his friends, half present, performing good boyfriend instead of being one. She's telling him something that actually matters to her, and he's nodding at the right moments, timing his smile correctly. But his eyes flick to the phone twice while she's mid-sentence, and something in her can feel that his attention is on how the moment looks rather than how it feels, even though she couldn't point to a single thing he did wrong. Now picture the version where the wine gets knocked over, the reservation gets lost, nothing photogenic happens at all, and he just laughs, pulls his chair closer so their knees touch under the table and says, "This is exactly the kind of chaos I actually like being in with you." Her brain quietly notes, he doesn't need this to be perfect to be happy, he just needs me. Not the perfect date. Not the impressive plans, not the version of you curated for an audience that isn't even in the room, but a man who is more interested in her reaction to a real moment than in how the moment reflects on him. That's when she stops feeling like an accessory to your image and starts feeling like the actual point of your attention. This isn't a lesson in being less romantic or caring less about the little details. It's an identity shift. The difference between a man performing devotion for an audience and a man who's simply quietly devoted whether anyone's watching or not. Most guys try to fix this by planning even more elaborate moments, thinking the problem is effort, when the actual problem was always attention. You can plan the most extravagant night imaginable and still be 1,000 miles away if your mind is busy narrating the moment instead of living inside it. And she can always tell the difference, even when she can't quite name what's missing. But presence in the good moments only means something if it's still there when things go quiet, and that's exactly where the next habit lives. Here's the part almost nobody says out loud, because it doesn't sound like a red flag from the outside. It's inconsistency, being fully present one week and strangely distant the next, running hot and cold without ever meaning to. Most guys chalk this up to being busy, or tired, or just having an off week, and technically, each individual excuse is true. But the deeper pattern underneath it is that unpredictability, even innocent unpredictability, keeps someone's nervous system on alert instead of at rest. And a nervous system that never fully relaxes eventually stops wanting to try. Picture 2 weeks. Week 1. He's texting good morning with a little too much punctuation, planning the weekend down to the restaurant, fully engaged, laughing easily on the phone with his feet up. Week 2. Work picks up. He goes quiet, replies get shorter, one word, sometimes just a thumbs up emoji, and he doesn't explain why. He just assumes she'll understand because nothing's actually wrong on his end. Her brain is quietly asking, on a loop, every time her phone buzzes, which version of him do I get today? And that question, asked enough times across enough weeks, exhausts a person even when they still love the answer they eventually get. Now picture the same busy week, but this time he says, once, clearly, hey, work's intense this week. I might be slower to respond and a little more in my head. It's not about you. I still want the good morning texts. I just might be late with them. Same behavior, completely different feeling on the other end. Because now, the inconsistency has context instead of mystery. Not more consistency you can't actually sustain. Not pretending to have the same energy every single day. Not overpromising just to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. But a man who names the shift before she has to guess at it. That's the difference between a woman feeling confused by you and a woman feeling like she still fully knows you, even on your quieter weeks. Unpredictability in a relationship works a lot like weather with no forecast. A person can live through a storm just fine if they know it's coming and know roughly how long it'll last. It's the storms that show up with no warning, over and over, that eventually make someone stop wanting to leave the house at all. This isn't about becoming a robot who feels the exact same way every day of the week, because no real person actually works like that. It's about becoming a man who gives her the forecast instead of just the weather, so she's never left standing there trying to guess whether to bring an umbrella. And once she stops having to guess at your moods, there's one more thing she starts watching closely, whether you still have any of your own. This is the one that hides best, because it looks like devotion. It's making her responsible for his emotional state, quietly, subtly, without either of them noticing until it's already the water they're both swimming in. Most guys think being emotionally open means telling her everything they feel, whenever they feel it, and trusting her to help carry it. But here's what nobody explains. There's a difference between sharing a feeling and outsourcing your regulation of it, and a woman's body knows the difference long before her mind puts language to it. Picture him coming home after a bad day. Keys dropped a little too hard on the counter, jacket thrown instead of hung, and instead of naming it, he goes quiet and irritable, short answers, a heavy sigh at nothing in particular, and when she asks what's wrong, he says nothing. But his whole body is saying otherwise, shoulders up near his ears, jaw tight, and somewhere in the evening she ends up doing the emotional labor of decoding him, tiptoeing around him, soothing him, managing him, without him ever asking her to, and without him ever thanking her for it either. Something in her is quietly registering. I am not his partner right now. I am his unpaid therapist. Now picture the version where he walks in and says, "Rough day, I'm a little in my head, I don't need you to fix it. I just wanted you to know so it's not about you if I'm quiet tonight." He goes for a walk or sits with it for 20 minutes and comes back lighter, on his own. Her brain quietly notes, he can hold his own weather. I don't have to hold it for him. Not silence dressed up as strength, not moodiness she has to reverse engineer, not making her guess what's wrong and then resenting her for not knowing. But a man who can name what he's feeling without making it her job to fix it. That's when love stops feeling like a second full-time job and starts feeling like an actual place to rest. This isn't about hiding your feelings or pretending to be unaffected by a hard day, because that would just be the silent version of the same problem wearing a different outfit. It's the difference between handing someone your weather and simply letting them know it's raining where you are right now. A partner who's told about the storm can bring an umbrella if she wants to. A partner who's expected to guess the storm exists and then manage it without being asked eventually stops walking outside with you at all. And this last one is the quiet root underneath almost every other habit on this list, the one that, once you fix it, tends to fix the rest of them on its own. This is the part that changes everything once you actually see it. It's losing himself, slowly, one small agreement at a time, until there's no one left standing on the other side of the relationship to actually be attracted to. Most guys think being easygoing, agreeable, always flexible, always putting her preferences first, is what makes a relationship peaceful. But the deeper truth, the one that stings a little, is that a woman cannot lean on a man who has nothing solid standing underneath him, no matter how kind he is. Picture the version where she's scrolling a delivery app, phone tilted toward him, and asks, "Where do you want to eat?" And he shrugs without even looking up from his own screen. "I don't care. Wherever you want," for what feels like the 200th time, and she picks the movie, the friends they see, the plans for Saturday, always, because he's stopped having preferences worth mentioning, or stopped believing they'd matter enough to bring up. Something in her, even if she can't name it, starts to feel less like she's with a partner and more like she's the only adult in the room making decisions. Now picture the version where he says, easily, without tension, "Actually, I really want Thai food tonight, and Saturday I want to see my brother, but I'm flexible on Sunday, what works for you?" Nothing dramatic, just a man who still has a shape of his own. Her brain quietly registers something that sounds almost like relief. He's still in here. I'm not the only one holding this up. Not louder opinions for the sake of being difficult. Not manufactured conflict to seem interesting. Not performing confidence you don't actually feel. But a man who has simply kept enough of himself intact that there's someone real for her to be attracted to in the first place. That's when a relationship stops feeling like one person managing two people's needs and starts feeling like two whole people choosing each other, on purpose, again and again. A relationship without two separate shapes leaning into it isn't really a relationship anymore. It's one person's structure with a second person quietly absorbed into it. And structures like that don't feel romantic to live inside for very long. They feel unstable, the same way a tent only stands because both poles are still doing their job. This isn't about becoming harder to please or manufacturing opinions you don't actually hold. It's the identity shift that underlines everything before it on this list, because a man who still knows what he wants, still says it out loud, and still exists as a whole person inside the relationship, is a man who was never going to need constant reassurance in the first place, was never going to over-explain himself into smallness, was never going to disappear during conflict because he'd have nowhere solid to disappear from. It's 11:42 on a different night now, and he's lying next to her again, except this time the phone is face down on the nightstand, not lit up, not waiting for anything. He can hear her breathing change the way it does when she's actually asleep, easy and even, not the careful kind of quiet from before. He's not running the last conversation through his head 9 times. He already said the thing he needed to say, out loud, earlier, calmly, and it landed exactly the way honesty usually does when it isn't wrapped in fear. None of this was ever a checklist of things to perform for her. It was never about becoming easier to manage or more convenient to love. It was about becoming a man whose peace doesn't come from her approval, whose presence doesn't disappear under pressure, whose opinions and needs and quiet Tuesday moods still exist even inside a relationship built around two people. When you internalize that, you stop reacting to her and start actually responding to her, and she will feel that difference in her body before you've said a single word about it. You didn't need to become a different person to fix any of this. You needed to become more fully the person you already were before fear started making your decisions for you, before old habits from old rooms started running the show in a relationship that never actually asked for them. The version of you that doesn't chase reassurance, doesn't disappear during hard conversations, doesn't need every night to be a performance. That version was never a stranger you had to build from scratch. He was just buried under years of learned protection, waiting for enough safety to come back out. Attraction was never something you had to manufacture. It was something you had to stop quietly giving away, one habit at a time, without even noticing you were doing it. If you recognized yourself in one of these more than the others, that's not a verdict on you. That's just the starting point. And it's worth sitting with for a second instead of scrolling past it. If you want to know exactly what it looks like to rebuild presence and stability once you've noticed a pattern like this, that's the video I made right after this one, and it picks up exactly where tonight leaves off. Wherever you are in this right now, whatever version of that late-night ceiling-staring silence you've lived through, this isn't the end of the story. It's just the first time someone finally said the quiet part out loud, and now that you've heard it, you get to decide what you do with it from here. Maybe you close this video and nothing changes tonight, and that's fine. Real change was never going to happen in the length of one video anyway. But maybe tomorrow, when she asks a small question that used to send you looking for reassurance, or when a conversation starts sliding toward an argument you'd normally disappear from, you catch it a half second earlier than you would have yesterday. That half second is where all of this actually lives. Not in some dramatic overnight transformation, but in 100 small half seconds, chosen a little differently than before, stacking quietly on top of each other until one day, the version of you from that opening scene, staring at the ceiling, running the conversation through his head for the 9th time, simply isn't the man lying there anymore. If any of this landed somewhere real for you, drop the number of the habit that hit closest to home in the comments, because you'd honestly be surprised how many people reading them are standing exactly where you are tonight.